What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're finally going to be doing our Anakin Skywalker Hero guide after he did receive his little hotfix just a few days ago. Now, I obviously try and get these guides out for you guys as soon as possible. However, I think it was clear from the get-go that Anakin would definitely get some kind of nerf in the near future, so I decided to hold off a little bit before I did upload the original hero guide for Anakin that I had already made, and lo and behold, he did get a nerf almost exactly a week after release. So I've made the necessary changes, and this will hopefully be the last guide that I'll need to make for Anakin. Now, you can obviously tell already that this is going to be a much longer hero guide than most of the others, as there is so much to go through with Anakin, so hopefully this one doesn't go too long for you guys. If you haven't seen my latest hero guides, then I will leave a link on screen at the end of the video, as well as a card up in the top right of your screen, so make sure to go and check those ones out as well. With that out of the way though, we are going to go ahead and get stuck right into it. So we're going to start off with his base stats, and like I mentioned in all of these hero guides, all of these stats have been double checked by both myself and one of my subscribers, and there will be a link in the description where you can find his Reddit post with all of these stats. Now, we both tested these in arcade, and while I'm 99% sure all of these stats do transfer over to multiplayer, just bear in mind that there is always a chance that some stats may change from arcade to multiplayer. So if you see any stats that don't seem right, then definitely feel free to let me know down in the comments. So first off, we're going to take a look at his base HP, and he does actually have the equal highest health pool in the game, coming in at 800 health. On top of that, he does have pretty much the average for a saber user's health regen pool as well, coming in at 250. So in terms of his health, he's easily one of the better characters in that regard, and his health really shouldn't be an issue at all if you do play it smart. Now, his weapon of choice is his iconic blue lightsaber that is so widely known throughout the entire Star Wars saga. It deals 140 damage to the front and 180 from behind, which is the highest damage of any saber user by a fairly long margin. So this does show just how powerful Anakin is already without even having to look at the rest of his stats. On top of that, he does also have the fastest swing speed in the entire game, coming in at 1.9 swings per second, which is definitely pretty crazy. That means you can take out any regular class in pretty much 1 second flat, so that combined with the high damage output is a recipe for success. His lunge distance is what I would consider to be medium. Some lunges are short, but his initial lunge can be pretty decent, so I thought I'd call it medium, seeing as it does change from swing to swing. On top of that, he does also have a pretty decent stamina pool. It's really good at deflecting blaster bolts, but against enemy saber attacks it is slightly lower than some others in the game, so I thought I'd leave that as a medium as well. Now, moving on to his abilities, and he does without a doubt have the best set of abilities of anyone in the game, mainly due to their straight up power, but for anyone who didn't know, he does also have a fourth ability, which is unique to Anakin and Anakin only. His L1 ability is called Passionate Strike, and this causes Anakin to unleash a heavy strike, breaking the guard of his enemies as well as knocking them to the ground, and it does only have a 10-second cooldown too, which is also very handy to know. It deals anywhere from 150 to 300 damage depending on whether you're close enough to land a second hit, as well as if you use it on a hero or a trooper. But rather than rambling on, I'll leave a link to my Mythbusters episode where I did break down exactly how much damage it can deal. This ability is honestly just what the game needed to get rid of those pesky block spammers. It is so useful in HVV to deal instant damage to anyone, and it is also a really good way to finish off a blocking enemy if they are a little low on health. Its only downside is that it can be dodged fairly easily because of the slowish animation, but for the most part you should be able to land the majority of your hits if you do use it properly. Moving on to his L1R1 ability, and this one is called Pull Dominance, and it has a very nice 15-second cooldown. This is very similar to Kylo's Force Pull in that it will pull anyone within the area of effect right towards Anakin's feet. However, there are definitely a few differences between the two. Kylo can use his ability in the air while Anakin can't. However, Anakin's pull does also deal 120 damage too, so it is definitely a more powerful version of Kylo's ability. This is great for gathering groups of enemies together and leaving them off their feet and open to attack, and it goes in perfect combination with any of his other abilities as well as just a regular attack to finish them off. Its only downside is that it can also be blocked with a saber as well as dodged out of too, so it's a great ability to use, but there definitely are ways for your enemies to get around it. Moving on to the R1 ability, which is arguably his best ability, and this one is called Heroic Might. This ability causes Anakin to gain 90% damage reduction while he charges it up, and the more damage he takes in this animation, it will cause a higher damage output as well. With no damage taken at all, it will still deal 100 damage on impact, and fully charged it can deal up to 450 damage as well as gain a larger radius as it charges up, and with only a 13-second cooldown you can see just why this ability is so powerful. Now, you can either hold the R1 button, power it up, and then as you let go it will release, or you can just press the R1 button once and then a second time for the release, or you can actually just let it release on its own as well, so there are different ways to go about it. I generally tap it once and then either let it release on its own or cancel it as early as I've taken a little bit of damage to give enemies less of a chance to actually get out of the range of the ability, but like I said, you can really do it however you see fit. This thing is easily one of the best in the game when it comes to just clearing out rooms and objectives, as enemies will generally charge it up and allow for a one-hit kill, and even if you cancel it early, it is still just like a 360-degree force push, so even at its weakest, it is still somewhat useful. One useful tip for this ability is that you can actually hold your block and at the same time activate the ability, and that will stop any chance of the ability being stopped with a stun lock or dying before it activates if you are low on health, so that's something to keep in mind when using the ability. The only real downside to this thing is that it can leave you pretty vulnerable after you come out of the animation, and it does seem to bug out from time to time as well and keep you in that animation for an extended period, so as good as it is, it definitely isn't perfect either. Moving on to his fourth ability, which is activated by holding the Y or triangle button on consoles and pretty much whatever you set it to on PC, and this one is called Retribution. Now, unlike any other ability in the game, this one actually charges depending on how much damage both you and your teammates take, pretty much charging quicker the more damage that you all take. You'll see it filling up the meter down in the bottom right, and then it will have a red number in the middle when it's available, which shows how many enemies are in the area of effect. So if you are planning on using it, then keep an eye on that number and wait until it gets a little bit higher before actually using it. It's hard to actually test the amount of damage necessary to charge it fully, but it seems to be around 1500 to possibly even 2000 damage between you and your teammates before it will fully charge and become available for use. This thing will deal roughly 425 damage to anyone caught in the area of effect, so this is yet another absolutely devastating ability, and it is a lot of the reason why Anakin is so powerful. This thing is just as good as Heroic Might for taking out rooms full of enemies, and it has even less time for enemies to avoid it too, so you can make the argument on which one is actually the better ability. Similar to Heroic Might though, it will also leave you fairly vulnerable as the animation ends, and so you do just need to be careful after using it. So that's it for all of his base stats and abilities. Now we're going to move on to some of the more important stuff, starting with the best star cards for Galactic Assault. Now I usually only mention 3 or 4, maybe 5 cards that are worth using, but for Anakin I'm actually going to mention 7 different cards because depending on your own playstyle, most of these cards are all extremely good options. I'm going to start with the 3 cards that I have used the most so far. They aren't necessarily the only cards that I use, as I do switch it up depending on maps and stuff like that, and then I will also touch on the other 4 and explain just why they can be so useful. So the first card I'm going to recommend is his Tenacious Star card, and this will give Anakin increased maximum health by up to 200 extra HP when fully maxed out. This one definitely isn't necessary if you feel confident enough without it, as he does still have 800 HP anyway, but for me I love adding to that extra health and giving myself an even better chance for survival than normal, so that is why I've mainly been using this card. The next card I'd recommend using is the Reprisal card, which is his health on kill card, and as I'm sure you all know by now, this grants Anakin 20 HP per regular trooper kill and up to 120 HP per villain kill, which is actually the highest awarded of any character in the game, so this one is a must have for keeping those kill streaks alive for as long as possible. The third card I'm going to recommend is the Control the Force card, and this one increases the base radius of Heroic Might by up to 5 meters. This one can definitely be switched out for some other cards, as Heroic Might is already pretty beastly on its own, but after the slight nerf a few days ago, this added range does definitely come in handy, so if you rely heavily on the Heroic Might, then this card is definitely a good one to use. Now, like I said, these 3 cards are the 3 that I've personally been using most of the time in Galactic Assault. However, there is so many other cards to choose from, and other than probably the health on kill card, you can pretty much chop and change any of these cards without losing too much in return. So the next card worth mentioning is his Massive Strikes card, and this one pretty much just makes Anakin one-hit kill any class other than the heavy from the front and one-hit kill all classes from behind. Now this is easily one of the better cards, and I have been told by some of the big kill streakers that this is what they use, and that definitely adds a lot more credibility to the card. So you're probably wondering why I don't personally use this one all the time when some of the better players in the world have recommended to use it. My reasoning behind leaving it out most of the time is that he already deals the most damage in the game as well as the fastest swing speed in the game, and so you already take out any class within 1 second regardless if you do use this card or not. Not only that, but whenever I do use this card, it sometimes tends to make me lazy thinking that it's always going to be a one-hit kill, and sometimes I actually forget that it won't one-hit a heavy, so at the end of the day it is not always a one-hit kill. For me, that just makes me not want to use it all the time, as I just prefer to be in the habit of always swinging twice to take anyone out rather than sometimes swinging once and then sometimes having to swing twice anyway. On top of that, Passionate Strike is also a one-hit kill attack anyway, and so if you do really need to get a one-hit kill, then you can just use that ability and take out any class in one hit. Now, with all that being said, it's still easily one of the best star cards in the game, and like I mentioned, you're probably better off listening to the advice of those other guys over me because they're very clearly better players, but it does all just come down to whether you personally think that that half a second faster kill is worth the card slot or not. Now, moving on to another card that I couldn't really leave out, and this one is his All of Them star card. Fully upgraded, this makes it so that if you pull 2 or more enemies at once, it will deal 170 damage, meaning you can essentially turn Pull Dominance into another one-hit kill ability, making all 4 of his abilities a one-hit kill, which is definitely very crazy to think about. Another card that goes hand in hand with this one is the Attraction star card, and this just increases the range of the Pull Dominance ability. Nothing too special here, but combined with that last star card, it is a pretty deadly combination for sure. Now, lastly, I'm just going to quickly mention his Raw Strength star card, and this one adds up to an extra 50 damage to the base damage of his Heroic Might ability. As of right now, this card is pretty much useless to be honest, but the more that people catch on to not shooting at him while he's charging Heroic Might, the more useful this card will become, as it pretty much means that this thing is always a one-hit kill to anyone but the heavy class, regardless if they do shoot at you or not. Again, definitely not the greatest card, but I thought it was worth mentioning anyway. Now, again, your choice of cards does just come down to how you play with Anakin and what you think will better increase your own chances of doing well. A perfect example of this is that if you prefer having more health, then the bonus health card is definitely a good choice for you. If you're happy without that added health and want to be able to make better use of the Pull Dominance, then the extra damage card for that ability will be a better choice for you as well. If you want to be able to one-hit kill most enemies, then the extra saber damage is the better choice for you, and so on. There's no right or wrong when it comes to picking cards for Anakin, as they all help in their own way, so I recommend just going into a few games and testing out different combinations to see which suit you and your playstyle the best overall. So now moving on to some of the best maps to choose Anakin on when you're playing Galactic Assault, and the top 3 that I've picked are Naboo, Tatooine and Endor. To be honest, he's pretty much the best on any map in the game anyway, so there's no real benefit to sharing any of these maps, but if I had to pick 3 that I could only play as Anakin on, then these would definitely be my own choices. Now, moving on to some tips for Galactic Assault, and to be honest, Anakin is probably the most self-explanatory character in the game, so I'll try and keep this section short and sweet. The main way you're going to find yourself getting kills is with his Heroic Might ability as well as Retribution when it does become available, and so the main tip I have is to try and get yourself into aggressive areas on the map where you can use those abilities quickly as soon as they do become available. This doesn't mean to always be in those aggressive areas at all times, but to be close enough to those areas such as the Naboo hallways or some of the objective rooms on the Death Star for example, so that when the ability does become available you can act quickly and then use Heroic Might or Retribution while all of those enemies are bunched up together. By doing this you can fairly easily get some 8, 9, even 10 man multi-kills with literally the click of a button, and this is going to be crucial to gaining back health as well as clearing areas of enemies, which then allows you to cool down abilities without the hassle of enemies constantly being nearby. The more time you have free of constant pressure from the enemies is the more time you'll have to set yourself up in strong areas as well as navigate the map to find even more enemies. So those 2 abilities are definitely something you want to pretty much use as soon as you get the chance, as long as you're not risking too much to use them, as that can definitely lead to a quick death. Now the other thing I want to mention is some of the combinations you can use to quickly take out enemies, and more specifically reinforcements or villains, as regular troopers can obviously be taken out fairly quickly anyway. If a reinforcement or a villain comes close enough with their guard down, then a good combination is to double tap that Heroic Might to use it like a force push, which will deal 100 damage as well as knock them off their feet. As soon as you've done that, you can then use the Pull Dominance to pull them right to your feet, and that will also deal an extra 120 damage, and then combine that with your Passionate Strike ability, and that can deal a total of up to 400 or 500 damage altogether. They'll also be knocked to the ground too, so you can quickly follow that up with a regular saber attack or 2, and at that point almost any villain in the game will be dead, and even if they're not, they're going to have no more than maybe 100 HP left while you're standing there with up to 1000 health, so at that point the fight is almost over anyway. Now, you can do that combination in pretty much any order that you want to. It doesn't really have to go in that exact order like I mentioned. You can maybe start off with the Pull Dominance and then a Heroic Might push and then follow that with a Passionate Strike. So overall, the order doesn't necessarily matter. There are plenty of really good combinations to use. Anakin is an absolute beast at dealing with villains, so you should take it on yourself to try and take care of any villains that you do see around the map. Now, this doesn't mean go chasing after them. You also want to let them actually come to you, because if they don't, then they're no risk to you anyway. But if a villain does come close enough, then you should make it your goal to try and take them out, unless they are obviously surrounded by their own teammates. Killing those villains will help regen any lost health, as well as helping your team in the long run when it comes to playing the objective, so take it on yourself to take out enemy villains when the chance does arise. So with a little bit of practice and some of these tips, I'm sure you guys can go on some absolutely mental kill streaks with Anakin. Like I said, he's easily the best character in the game, and he's easily one of the funnest because of that as well. So that is going to be it for the Galactic Assault tips. Now we're going to move on to some tips for the hero versus villain game mode. So starting starting off with the best star cards, and the first card I'm going to recommend is the Tenacious star card that I mentioned earlier, which gives him that added 200 HP, so this one is pretty self-explanatory. More health equals more survivability, which generally equals more kills. The next card I'd recommend is the Massive Strikes card, and again, this is pretty self-explanatory too. The more damage you deal, the more kills you're going to get, so this is definitely another handy card to use. As for the third card, I'd recommend using the Fierce Fighter star card, which reduces the cooldown of Passionate Strike by up to 4 seconds, meaning you can use it every 6 seconds, which is definitely pretty crazy. The more you can use this ability, the more you're going to dominate characters like Vader or Dooku, because there's not really much they can do to stop your attack, so you'll find yourself winning a lot more saber battles with this card equipped. Now, these are the 3 cards that I pretty much always use. However, if you're dealing with a running Boba Fett, then I'd definitely recommend using the Attraction card instead. Having that extra pull range can make Boba useless if he's anywhere near you at all. Once you pull him out of the sky and hit him a few times, he's almost certainly dead, so this is a good way to counter those pesky Boba runners. As for the Health on Kill card, this is another one that can be really handy, so if you feel like you need some extra health throughout the game, then this is another handy card to use. So these are just the cards that I personally use in these hero modes. Again, this doesn't really mean that these are the only cards to choose, so definitely feel free to leave your own cards down below if you do tend to disagree with my choices. Now, moving on to some tips for the hero game modes, and honestly, most of what you need to know has pretty much already been said when I talked about the villains in Galactic Assault earlier, so I'm pretty much just going to reiterate what I mentioned before. Pretty much just combine your abilities like I said, block when you need to, and then attack while the enemy's guards are down, and then if they do block again, make the most of that Passionate Strike before they have a chance to dodge it. He has the highest health, the highest damage output, the best abilities, the fastest swing speed, and all around he is just a genuine machine in game modes like this. So like I said, make the most of your abilities, don't play too aggressively to the point where you're going to take a heap of damage, and that alone should be really all you need to know about how to dominate as Anakin. Now lastly, I usually go over some enemy heroes that can be a bit of an issue, but to be perfectly honest, there is no one on the dark side that can be a genuine threat to Anakin if you play it smart. Someone like Chewie can be an issue to the dark side characters because no matter what you can do, he can just shoot through your block, so he can be a real issue for the dark side heroes. As for Anakin though, there's really no one on the dark side that can really threaten you unless you aren't playing it safe, so overall the main tip is just to play smart and not too aggressively, and there's really not a whole lot that anyone can do in a one-on-one. So that is going to do it for our Anakin hero guide, guys. This one was extremely long compared to most of the others, so I do apologise if I bored you at any point, but with so many useful cards and abilities, this one was always bound to be a much longer video, and hopefully it did at least help some of you guys out. If you did enjoy the video, guys, then make sure to leave a like down below. Not only does it help support the channel, but it does also show me that you guys do want to see more of these updated hero guides. The next guide will be a Darth Vader guide, and then after that, hopefully a Luke and Palpatine guide as well, so make sure to keep your eyes peeled for those among other things as well. If you are new to the channel, then definitely feel free to subscribe, and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.